Pop in, say hi. If you've never come to one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And this is my Sunday night show. And because I take Saturdays off, I'm supposed to be coming in, right? Just light and casual and feeling good about going into the next week. But Cindy was in it a little bit. I take advantage of Saturdays sometimes if I don't spend that time outside. I barely got any outdoor time yesterday. My own choice, right? All I did was go to the walk to the store, and that was good enough. That was all I needed for the day, and it made me feel good that I at least managed that. It was a last minute decision. I was having a craving that needed to be resolved. And I don't think that craving was actually a treat or a goodie or anything. I think that craving really was for me to get outside, to get some fresh air, not necessarily to have an adventure, go for a long walk. It was in the evening time that I went out, but that fresh air, that nice, clean, it was so mild out yesterday. When I went for a walk, I didn't even have to wear a scarf or my snow pants or anything. It was so lovely. Hello, Owen. They say that a Nino, is that what they call it? That weather system is going to cause us some havoc. Starting now, they say that possibly we might have some issues. I think if we're going to have some issues and it's going to get really warm, I think some of those issues will probably be flooding here in Winnipeg. And if you don't know, I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. We are in a flood zone, but we had some really smart government officials in, I think, the early 60s, and they got it into their head to invest some money, invest in some infrastructure, and they put a floodway around the entire city. Cost a lot of money back then, but I couldn't even imagine that the city would be able to afford something like that in this day and age that we live in, because that is probably, when it comes to infrastructure, that might just be one of the most expensive things a city can do. But, being in the crossroads of two major rivers, the Assiniboine River and the Red River, we flooded almost every single year. It's part of the history of the area that we live in. And it's something that's always been going on. But I don't know how much you guys actually pay attention to Canadian news and events, but we have had some pretty significant floods here. Hello, Andrew. Andrew made it in too. I don't know if you guys probably heard about the Great Red River flood of the early 1900s or late 1800s. It was devastating. I think it was early 1900s because of the housing and the buildings that were taking out with the flooding. And not only that, a lot of people couldn't tear down their houses, could they? A lot of people were not in those financial situations when that flood came in and that water came halfway up the walls. For the most part of the summer, people lived in their backyards, had all their windows open, had their doors open, and just tried to naturally air their homes out. In that day and age, I'm not sure if bleach was available, that they were actually thinking about mold. They must have been, to some extent, if they knew that they had to properly dry their homes out, but they couldn't rebuild. Most people just did not have the money in the late 1800s, early 1900s to replace their homes. And if they replaced their homes, it would be shortly after, right? Maybe even in the next spring, that their homes would flood again. Even in when I first moved here to Manitoba, I was 18 years old. And I missed the big flood of 97, only because my husband got stationed in Edmonton. And that year we picked up and we moved to Edmonton. And so we missed that flood, but it was huge news all over North America. But early, these early floods, they really uh, made a lot of homes undesirable, because over the course of the decades, right, that black mold would set in. Did you guys remember hearing about the Red River flood? Uh, I know Minnesota got it really, really bad. They've actually had some pretty bad storms, winter and spring. Their weather has been extreme. Even in the summertime during the Dust Bowl and stuff during the Great Depression, it was terrible. But there are neighbors. I believe Fargo is a sister city of ours here in Manitoba, and so when they have extreme weather situations, we usually get them at the same time. But going back to these government officials who decided to invest some money in building a floodway around the city, they saved so much money doing it when they did. Number one, at that time, it was 20 years after the Second World War. And we always know that there's a big boom after wars, right? Financial booms and building and innovation booms. And so they utilized that money to do something really good for our city that has lasted right up till this point. Now, it's not like we don't get those floods. Those floods still happen, but they don't make themselves known inside the city itself, because they open up the floodgates, and the floodway fills up, and it takes a lot of that burden in the water actually coming into the city. Not all of it, right? Because again, those rivers run through the city here too, right? The Red River and the Assiniboine River. And I believe both those rivers, right? And I'm waiting for Trump to say, hey, let's detour the Red River, which actually comes from the Mississippi, and then detour it so that it comes back into the States. I mean, that would be pretty smart if he would figure that out, especially with global warming and how precious water is, right? Here in Manitoba, we have some of the right biggest lakes in Canada. We have Lake Winnipeg and we have Lake Manitoba. And Andrew was actually correct in saying that they were not part of the Great Lakes. And the reason they're not part of the Great Lakes, and because there's air, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, there's I'm really bad with the lakes in Ontario. There's Lake Ontario. I would have to look at the maps, right? But we're not part of that system, and they actually say that Manitoba, and this is only something they've recently been talking about, that Manitoba is the most important province in all of Canada. because we have, what do you call it? Dominion over our water, because the Great Lakes flood into or flow into the Atlantic Ocean, and our lakes actually flow into Hudson Bay. And so the water is technically belong to Manitoba. It doesn't belong to any other province. And we don't share dominion, right, with like the Great Lakes and the Niagara Falls. That, like, that's all shared by the United States, right? When they put up the boundaries in between the two countries, right? They shared in the possession and in the stewardship of the Great Lakes. Manitoba was just kind of left on their own, I'm sure, up in the early 1800s. And because the lakes are all so close together, we're right next door to Ontario. If they had included Manitoba's lakes as part of the Great Lakes, right? Even though we're flowing into Hudson Bay, and because technically we're still flowing into the Atlantic, aren't we? Because Hudson Bay is seawater, and the two major rivers that flow into the Hudson Bay make the water, what do they call it? It starts with a K. Oh, I can't remember, but it makes it not true salt water. But Hudson Bay comes from the Atlantic Ocean, and Canada could have included Manitoba's lakes as part of the Great Lakes, but they didn't. And so Manitoba has secure dominion over the largest bodies of fresh water in Canada, which makes it the most important province when it comes to water. And especially when we're going into global warming, where water is going to be so important just for survival, let alone for taking care of the crops, but for actually mankind survival. Like, it's going to get hot, 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 right? Yeah. Let's see who else is in here. Oh, William's in here tonight. Hello, William. Oh, and Tammy's here tonight. Hello, Tammy. But I was in some interesting topics today, and I don't know. Andrew, do you know who Alfred Adler is? I'm sure you do, being the smarty pants that you are. And I say that in a very loving and kind way, because I am very grateful to have somebody with some, right, that kind of hangs out with us, and we learn just as much, right, from what Andrew has to contribute. But Alfred Sandler was a psychotherapist, and he actually was somebody who was colleagues with Carl Jung and Freud, right? And they were all working in psychology, even though every single one of them had different ideas and different perspectives when it came to psychology. Like, and I had a few, but I have to be very truthful, very truthful in this. Up until today, I didn't even know who Alfred Adler was. It's just that I hang out with another smarty pants. His name is Sam Vatkin, and he is, I believe he's Russian. I don't know. He has a strong accent. I'm not going to say for sure what nationality he is, but he is so smart. And most of my lessons in narcissism and different personality disorders, I take these lessons from him because he's honest, and he just doesn't use his own perspectives, even though I kind of have an inkling where he swings. But he dishes out like an appetizer platter perspectives from all kinds of people from all walks of life who are proficient in their studies when it comes to psychology. Sam Vatkin is not a psychologist or psychotherapist or anything like that, though he definitely could be if he wanted to be. But he is a professor of psychologists. So he teaches psychology uh, to his students who are the psychologists and the psychotherapists. And I guess for laymen's like me who are searching out answers and understandings and perspectives from somebody who is actually an expert in their field. And today he featured, right, Alfred Adler. And I had never heard of him before. I have heard of Freud, right? And I always thought Freud was maybe a little bit high on himself, right? That he was maybe doing it for the money. And Alfred Young, I really, or sorry, Alfred Young, Carl Young, I really appreciate him because he brought his own experiences into the conversation. Um, but, right, I believe that, when it comes to psychology and working in emotions, I think the hiccups and the problems come from religious and spiritual ideas when you mix that in. Not like I don't believe in those ideas. I just don't believe those ideas should be in the mix of psychology because it's twisted. And in through my own experiences, and you guys know, that I've talked about it before, that I'm not a true believer in turning the other cheek. And this was a lesson by Jesus on Sermon on the Mount. And, my parents used it extensively with me and the other kids, but mostly with me. And they also used archetypes, which also Carl Jung used. And archetypes caused so much emotional, mental anguish and problems with us kids, even problems that lasted right up to our adulthoods, which brings me to the fact of why I'm delving into these topics to start with, because I explore the inside and the outside, and I explore the inside for my own well-being. But I have never heard of Alfred, right? Alfred Adler. And then when I was listening to some of his ideas, I went, oh my goodness. He is so, and not just listening to his ideas, but actually sitting in with Sam Batkin, who actually brought the topic up that made it so that I had to do a little bit of Googling after my lesson. And right, Sam Batkin's lessons are usually at least 40 minutes or an hour longer sometimes. But I find them to be so interesting and so digestible. I really, really do. And I trust him. And that's what's most important, that whoever you learn from is somebody you trust, somebody who has the best answers, not the best answers, period, but the best answers in the moment. Because we know as time moves on, all of us get to be smarter, right? And if we choose, we can be smarty pantses, right? It's only in our choices and in our desire and in our love for learning that we actually learn, right? It's like if you want to be the best basketball player in the whole world, you're not going to be the best basketball player in the whole world by laying on the couch on Saturday afternoons and watching the games with the remote control, right? Just by watching other people. And even though, right, we sometimes think that we know better, we're screaming at the TV, you stupid idiot, you should have done it this way or this way. And right. And it's like being a backseat driver to a car. and so it's in our choices. And this is something that I really, really appreciated. And it really hit me in these ideas. It is in our choices to want to do better, right? And Alfred, right? Adler, he actually, I keep looking at his name here because I had to go back in just a few minutes before my live show just to figure out what his first name was, right? I knew his last name was Adler, but forgive me if I keep looking down here. I took a whole bunch of notes, but I was just thought I would just mention it because you guys are just gonna feel it properly in tonight's conversations, right? Because it just totally blew me away that I had never heard of this gentleman before. And yet his ideas just hit me as truths, right? And not all of them, right? Because he played a little bit in the archetypes, not in like scapegoat and golden child and middle child, though middle child was one of them, but in those roles like first child, second child, middle child, and the youngest child, right? And I did not grow up that way. My dad's used archetypes, or my mother used archetypes. One of them did, or maybe they did it jointly. I don't know. But each one of us were expected to play those roles. And I believe each one of us have distinct qualities, good ones and bad ones, that, right, kind of affect us in a good way or a bad way, even in our adult lives, right? But it's in our choices whether or not we want to work on the things that messed us up. And you guys know I love working in emotions, but I work in emotions for my own well-being, for understanding what went wrong, right? I was meant to pay attention and really understand what went wrong, not just with me, but within my whole family. And it wasn't originally supposed to be that way. I just wanted to understand for myself, but right in understanding for myself, then I went, oh, that's why so and so's like this, or that's why so and so lives like this, and this is why we butt heads. And it's in sorting those wires for each one of us individually, because right, depending on our experiences growing up, that's going to dictate the kind of lessons that we're going to need to resolve whatever issues that we have. And if you're somebody who likes me, who likes to delve in deep, right, have that also to bring to the table as part of my service. Because if I got sucked into that, then there are lots of other people out there who are not meeting their potentials in the moment because they chose not to, right? They chose to sit on the couch with the remote control and watch the basketball games, right? But one thing that I did appreciate, and one thing that I did take note that I find extremely curious, is that my father was born the same year as Alfred Adler, right? And I was born the same year as when Carl Jung died. I should have said Alf. My dad was born the same year as Alfred Adler died, and then I was born the same year as when Carl Jung died. And that is, I love finding those little clues, those little serendipities. Maybe my dad was the reincarnation of Alfred Adler, the way he brought up his kids. Maybe maybe because of my own understandings and being so into my head, right? That I also have that bit of Carl Jung in me. But today, oh my goodness, the similarities and the understandings and the truths in each one of us being responsible and using our own choices, whether to find out for ourselves where we got it wrong or where our parents got it wrong or our grandparents got it wrong, and be able to make choices in that, in creating a magnificent life for ourselves despite. Okay, let's come into the comments here for a moment and see who's all popped in. I was listening to the Super Bowl with Dr. DeLay's YouTube channel. I do not want to miss my Prairie Dodgers and Cindy's chat here. I love listening to her. Aw, Tammy, is that ever nice of you to say? You know what? You go watch the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is important. I know how important sports are. But that's interesting, Tammy, right? That you like football, right? Being a girl, right? It's not the norm. For myself, I am not a sports person. I know the Winter Olympics is going on right now, and I haven't even been into anything yet. And I think tonight after my live show, that's exactly what I'm going to go into, and I'm just going to, right, watch the Olympic. But I'm not a big sports person. As far as I go is I like the junior hockey games, finals, and I like figure skating, and I like triathlons quite a bit. They don't happen in the winter, but they have the one with the shooting. What's that one? It's almost the same idea, but it's they use bow and arrows and they jog and do all kinds of neat things. And but other than that, no, sports has never truly been my thing. As far I like low impact. I am a swimmer. I like to bike ride and I like to walk and hike. And that is pretty much it. And of course, the physical labor of any job that you do, but you're getting paid to do that physicality when it comes to your work, and it's not necessarily a choice because your bosses don't care that you're breaking your back or you're hurting your fingers. Look at my baby finger. I have broken my baby finger at least 5 or 6 times. Now it doesn't. This is as straight as it goes. Right? I'm grateful I haven't gotten arthritis. My mother had 12 different types of arthritis, and but she broke a lot of bones. She lived on a farm all her life, and she did a lot of horseback riding, falling off of horses and getting banged up and stuff. So she had a lot of calcium deposits in those healing bones. And eventually, and I'm not saying just because of breaking those bones, but they say breaking bones is one of the causes of arthritis stopping. But yeah, Tammy, right? Tammy, shut me off right now. You've said your hellos to everybody and go watch your Super Bowl. Come back at the halftime and say hi. Oh, Kathy too. Kathy's doing Kathy, go watch you guys, go watch all of you guys, go watch the Super Bowl. I am happy to sit here and yibber yabber, right? And you guys, you can always come back, right? Just go into my videos and I will be there. Oh, I have to give you guys some good news. I don't know. To me, it's really good news. Is one of my podcasts, What's My Good Cheer, uh, actually became the top video of the week. So that's a first for me. Usually it's one of my explore videos or one of my walking stick videos that actually makes the most views during the course of the week. But What's My Good Cheer made it as top video this week. So I'm kind of proud because that shows the advancement. That shows that the content is actually getting better. And that content is pretty. You guys think Carl Jung and, and Alfred Adler and Freud. I'm going to give Freud his credit too. Just because I'm not a big fan of Freud. He was still a smart man and he still put a lot of work into his ideas. They just didn't hit home with me. Never have. And I'm very surprised that I have never heard of Alfred Adler before and how I resonated with his content. But more importantly, it really blew me away with those two death dates that my father had one of them and I had the other one as our birth date. So that was pretty neat. Let me have a sip of my coffee and I hope Kathy and Tammy are out of here. Yeah, go watch. I forgot it was Super Bowl. Right? I forgot. I show up on Sundays no matter what. And I lots of times in my What's My Good Cheer, my podcast, lots of times I'm in there by myself. Well, as of late, I don't worry too much because I know Tammy and Eugene are gonna pop in. But for the most part, I have been on my own and then the views come in afterwards, right? Usually when people get home from work or there's nothing else to watch and or they have an issue and they see whether or not Cindy's got the answers for it. But the way I answer, I would never even assume to be in competition with Sam Batkin or Alfred Adler or Freud or Carl Jung. But because I like to swim in the same, maybe not the same pond, but I like to swim in the same topics. And, my idea is, that a lot of the smartest people, those people, right? And I learned this early in my own lessons, right? And this isn't my idea. And I don't even think it was the idea of the person that I learned it off. I'm sorry. I just had a blank there. I'm just gonna look at his name right here. I'm so ashamed. Evan Carmichael. I couldn't remember his first name. And I'm in his content every day. So it's nothing I think that's disrespectful. I just think I just had a brain fart there. I just had a brain fart there. But he was the first one that I heard that idea about, and I've just lost the idea that I was talking about. I was talking about too. It was a good one though. But I come in and it's just in layman's terms. There, I got it. I got it back. That he said, Evan Carmichael said that, that the person who's working at McDonald's right now, there's somebody working at McDonald's, and that person was supposed to discover the cure for cancer, right? But because of their choices or lack of choices, right, they'll never achieve that moment in their life. And like I said, I really appreciate Alfred Adler's ideas and the fields that he works in, because, it just lit a light bulb in my head in the way that I relate. But, right, I also have to take note of how I relay, because I don't relay. I would enjoy sitting having a cup of coffee, I think, with Sat Vatkin, but I don't know if he would enjoy that conversation with me, because I think he purposely brings himself down so that he can be relatable to people. He's got 160 IQ. I just found that out. 160. If you have 145 IQ, you're a genius. You could be part of Meta. And my father was prided himself in being a smarty pants too, and he had to take a test, I think, every 3 years to make sure that he kept hitting that number that made him so smart, right? Because it was important for him to be, was it Meta? It was a smarty pants group anyway, but he had to take a test every 3 years, I think, and he had to keep that number high. And my dad was very, very smart, and he delved deep into these topics that I'm kind of delving into now. But I could never think that I would be able to sit and enjoy a conversation with Freud, right? Not that I haven't even delved into his content, his personal content. I've only in the content that's presented by other people and the ideas presented by other people, and I formed opinions from that. And I don't think that's actually fair, right? So to say that I don't relate to him when I haven't even delved into his ideas, right? And I'm sure he's got a very unique spectrum that he works in. And he was president of a couple of really smarty pants societies in Europe. And he actually, when Alfred Adler retired from his society because they broke up as friends because they had different ideas, um, that 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 Freud actually plagiarized some of his ideas and some of his perspectives, and actually claimed them as his own. Carl Jung was friends with both of them, but I think he was that friend right in the middle. And sometimes that's a good place to sit, because you're able to absorb the perspectives of both, and in that maybe come up with your own perspective, which is a synthesis, right? That combination of all of it, right? Along with his own ideas. So I thought it was interesting. I will delve into Freud's. I'm not sure if I'm gonna enjoy it because it might be too technical for me. Like I said, I think Sam Vatkin, he makes himself presentable in a way that anybody could understand him, right? I'm not saying that he's layman. He's very far from layman because he is a professor in psychology, but he makes it understandable to anybody, I think, that is interested in the topics. And like I said, he's, I think, very honest, and he shares perspectives of lots of people. He even has his own perspectives, right? And he was actually clinically diagnosed as a narcissist. And right, it's hard to imagine because I've only seen a few minutes or a few times that maybe he might have stepped past somebody's boundaries that way. But you wouldn't think that was something that was distinct about him on a daily basis. For me, it's that layman's, because, like I said, that person who was supposed to cure cancer is working at McDonald's, that's the person that I want to influence, right? That's the person that I want to help. That's the person who should be, right? He should be curing cancer. And if I can't sit in with Freud, right, how can I expect that that person is going to be able or even want to, right? And sometimes, like my last podcast on Friday, I said sometimes we just have to be the example for others that it could be done, right? Okay, let's coming down into the comments here. Um, Isn't that interesting that the girls are all chalking football and my guys, let's see, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the guys are into the football too, but I am. Tabby says, no, I am staying here. It's not exciting, the Super Bowl right now. Mostly defense going on. Okay, defense. Right. I don't understand anything about football. My dad took me to all well, it was the BC Lions, where I'm originally from British Columbia. But yeah, I spent more time at the concession stand and then jumping up. Whenever my dad jumped up and got excited, I would jump up and get excited too, but only excited for him. I wanted him to enjoy his right, his game, because he was, but that's, it's supposed to be an event when you go to a football game or a hockey game or go to the Olympics, right? It's something special. For myself, I just like spending time with my dad. And my dad didn't have any sons, he didn't have any boys, and sometimes us kids got treated like the son he never had. And being the oldest and being the most relatable, right? And I think my dad enjoyed my company as much as I enjoyed his company. I think we were a little bit codependent that way, right? I shined on him, he shined on me, and we just made sometimes a miserable situation better. Sometimes, make a good time even better, right? And we can do that. And there's nothing wrong with being codependent on each other as long as there are differences, because we're supposed to learn off of each other. I didn't learn any of these ideas off of my dad. I don't know if I thought my dad was boring. Maybe I was just too young to be like, we did have deep conversations, but we didn't talk about psychology or emotions, right? Except for, giving me a little bit of a pep talk when my mom went at me. Okay. Uh it was that the those two darn words, the ones I think I did it on Thursday. Remember when I had that word acceptance? Or I wanted to go into the word acceptance again because of something. There was some kind of serendipity, and I didn't think I did a good job. So I wanted to come in and do the job a little bit better. So I went into this word acceptance again, using my own experience. And then during that conversation, I was just about to pick up the cards. I said, as long as we don't get that word community, let's just go in and see if the word comes up, or whatever word comes up, and if it's relatable to this topic of acceptance. Or I talked about getting those two words, acceptance and community, all the time. And then at the end of that podcast, and I picked my card. And what card did I pick? I picked the word community, and I just serendipities. There's so many that cross my path, right? Just like those two birthdays of Alfred Adler and Carl Jung being or not the birthdays, the days that they died were the days of, like, the same day, the same year, right? It just kind of blew me away. No, it wasn't the same day. Carl Jung died 4 months before I was born. Yeah, that's what happened. It was same year. It was the same year, not the same month. He died 4 months before I was born. Okay. I had a preventive medical exam last week. Doctor talked about injections to joint trouble. If it's cortisone, maybe not. The last one is the one that gave me blood poisoning and almost killed you. Okay, well, that kind of made your decision, isn't it? You can Google it, for these things. I never say self-prescribe. I always take the advice in that. But if something almost killed you, why would you do it again? Now, with cortisone, I think cortisone only gives you temporary relief, doesn't it, Andrew? I think it's almost like testosterone or something like that, or not testosterone. What do the weightlifters do, right? And I think it's something like that. But it's only temporary. But only temporary is something, Andrew, right? Even temporary is something. Do you do Epsom salts and baths? My sister does Epsom salts and baths, and she says it helps her a lot. I love my baths too, but I don't suffer. I'm grateful that I don't suffer joint pain or anything. I kind of broke my ring finger here. So every once in a while, when I smack my hand or something, all my fingers kind of electricity. I go like that for a moment. But halfway through the day, it's so much better. I know if I hit my hand, I'm going to get that shot of electricity through my middle finger and my ring finger. But that serves me right for not being careful. And I got to remember, I am 64 years old. That right, eventually these small mishaps are going to happen. I don't think I've ever broken the fingers in that hand. I did break my wrist. I slammed my wrist in a dishwasher when I was working in a truck stop one time. And like I said, I've broken my baby finger numerous times. But that's a human thing, isn't it? Right? I am grateful. I was born with good health. Like, right? And everybody says, why don't you struggle that way? Well, number one, I take lots of vitamins and minerals. I take a lot, and I formulate them to how I'm feeling, or right, whether I'm feeling down and out in one aspect. Then I know, right? Cindy needs some more sun. Cindy needs some more magnesium. Cindy needs some probiotics. Cindy, right? B12 if I'm really, really tired. And that doesn't happen very often. I have been going to bed a little bit earlier, right? 11 o'clock. I'm watching the clock, but I'm thinking that's too early to go to bed, Cindy. You can half an hour. If you could stay up another half an hour, and then you can go to bed, right? And then I stay up till 11:30, and then 11:30 I just shut everything down and I go to bed and I sleep until 7 o'clock in the morning, right? About 5 minutes to 7, because I wake up before my alarm. Then my alarm goes off. Then I get up, go to the washroom, and then I go back to bed. And I sometimes doze off for another hour. Sometimes I spend that hour just laying in bed in contemplation. And I find some of those best ideas and those best understandings, they come to me when I first wake up in the morning. and everything's shut down. There's nothing to distract me. I'm just laying there all comfy, right? All cozy, my bedroom window all wide open at -40. And I'm still hot. But that nice cool air and being all cozy in bed, and it's a great way for me to not meditate but be in contemplation. I did a meditation today with a lady I recently happened on to, and she does lots of meditations and she talks you through really, really, really well. And I've tried to do meditations before, and I'm not a big meditator. I don't do it very well. It's a little bit of my hypervigilant. I'm listening for the murderers and the rapers, right? And so I don't settle into a meditation very well. The very closest that I get to is when I go on my walks and I can just, right, just enjoy the fresh air and the trees and the birds, and just go with a blank head and just take in architecture. I love old architecture, so I'm always looking at old houses and fencing, and I stop in parks. And when I do the provincial parks in September, it's just sitting at the lakeside and just sitting there for just ever, right? And to me, that's meditation to me, right? Ideas and thoughts, and it all comes to me in that. But today I heard cat fighting. Okay, must be okay now. It's not doing it anymore. But anyway, that freaked me out. There's a lady down the hallway. She leaves her door open, and because the lady across the hall from me has a cat, they play that underneath the apartment doors like that. So maybe it got clawed by the other cat or something underneath the door. I don't know, but it just freaked out in the moment, and that freaked out. I freaked out. So that just kind of shows you my hypervigilant, the way I get distracted by these kind of things. So meditation on the norm does not work for me. But today I sat with a lady, and somebody I've come to appreciate. She really knows her stuff, and she's got a very kind heart. I can feel how kind her heart is, and I let her walk me through a meditation today, right? I had my window open, the cars were driving by, but I stayed with her and she talked me through it. And I actually think I got there for a minute or so. Maybe not quite a whole minute, but it's a lot better than what I usually do. And it's in our choices and it's in that practice that we get better at things, right? Okay, let's come down into the comments. I don't know if anybody else out there meditates, and if they really enjoy it, if it really serves them in meditating, right? Let me know if you are a meditator. I'd love to know that. Um, yeah, but Andrew, oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad that you're being taken care of, by specialists. But at the same time, Andrew, right? It's important not to get into that cycle, right? My sister got sucked into it. I'm grateful for it, right? But now she's in it, and I'm afraid that sometimes she's looked at as a paycheck. You know what I mean? That it, she's that they she's had a triple bypass, and she's doing all her checkups. She's doing really well with that, but she's also gotten herself in another situation with her diabetes where she's having problems with her eyesight, and yeah, she lost her driver's license, and she's feeling very, very, very bad about that, right? And right, I understand wholly. I didn't tell her, right? I did bring it to her attention, but I said, I'm thinking I got my legs chopped off at the knees when I lost my vehicle. If anybody understands how she feels, that impact in her life, it would be me, right? Because right, I got taken out in that, and it was really something very difficult for me to deal with, but I dealt with it, right? I didn't have a choice, just like she doesn't have a choice. And so she's doing what she has to do, but I just worry sometimes that she gets sucked into that system where she has doctor's appointments every week, because every time she goes to a doctor, it's 50 or $75 in somebody's pocket, just to, even if it's just a checkup. But the thing is, they're not taking consideration her mental well-being, and her mental and emotional well-being is taking such a hit, like it's such a hit, and there really isn't anything I can do for her except to be sympathetic in that, and to just be a sister, just be a listener, right? Just let her know that I care that she's having these issues, but it's she's still doing it all on her own, right? But yeah, there's, I would say, the cortisone, take the cortisone, Andrew. Uh, Make sure they're clean needles. Take the cortisone, but and it's temporary, and I don't like the idea that you have to go back to the doctor, because I know those shots only last a couple of months, if that. But innovation is always moving. So at least when you're with your doctor, if something new comes into the system, right, that he'll know to make sure that you're prescribed that, right? Whether it's a medication or exercising or something. But like I said, my sister finds great relief in Epsom salts, taking baths in Epsom salts. And I get it, right? I think it's the magnesium in the Epsom salts, and when you soak into that, it goes into your system. I wondered, I was very curious my whole life. How come we can have hot bubble baths, go into these baths, and not cook like a lobster? Yes, our skin goes red, but are we cooking underneath that when we take those hot baths? I know that Filipinos don't drink cold water because it's hard on the system when they take it down. They like their water at room temperature. So I was wondering if maybe it was something like that, that we just kind of built up a resistance for the hot water. I don't know how that's possible, because we've only been taking hot water baths for maybe 100 years, if that, for the most part, right? When we were kids, we lived on a farm for 6 months, and my dad would pull in this great big monster horse trough, and us kids would go outside and collect snow, and we would put it on the wood stove, heat it, pour it in, get it going again. And that water, by the time we filled that tub up, it would be lukewarm, if that. And then my dad would take a bath, and then my mom would get into the tub after him and take her bath. And thank goodness I was the oldest child, and I would take my bath until it was just pure mud. And my little sister would get to have her bath, right? I just had that memory of that horse trough, and that's the idea, right? We didn't have, in the days of not having running water, we took cold baths. If it was summertime, maybe we would pull those horse troughs out into the open, into the sun, and let the sun warm the water, right? But for the most part, yeah, it was pulling in the horse trough into the house. Um, a steroid, yeah. I knew it had something to do with these guys. Andrew. Well, I'm glad that you're looking for solution at the very least, right? But I also know that you don't have as inexpensive healthcare system as we do here in Canada. So I know it's probably pretty pricey for you to do the cortisone, but whatever it takes to help you. But sometimes it's that mental thing, and if that emotional experience, that mental experience where you came so close to death, right, from something else, I don't think I would be able to try it again, right? I think I would be overcome by by the questioning as to what would happen. But you have to make that decision, Andrew. It's your life, but at the same time, to get advice from others, right? Yeah, it was when he had his staph infection. Yeah, when he was in the hospital. And he never missed a live show. Oh my goodness, I was so upset with him that he came that close and he still showed up in my live shows. Oh my goodness. That's dedication, right? Yeah, I love Andrew for that. That's the person that he is, and I love him for the person that he is, right? Yeah. It was a major experience and one I don't care to repeat. Yeah, weird experience, huge infection, but no fever, and my leg felt like it was exploding inside. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad they caught it though, right? Lots of people, I've seen those people who get that infection and they don't survive, or they do survive and they have no limbs, right? Because they have to be amputated because they just, right? Yeah, that Andrew was so lucky. Oh my goodness. And at the very least, I could have said some good cheer to him, right? I'm not a big prayer, but he would have been in my thoughts for sure. Yeah, some people just keep things to themselves, right? But you never know the miracle or the innovation or the great idea or the resources that come to your path or come by your path when people know that you're in need, right? And I'm I kind of learned that to express my needs very early, only because I knew and understood by my own experience that nobody was interested in helping the little fat kid, right? Unless they felt sorry for them. And so I think I learned pretty early to express myself, express my needs, and also grateful that people recognized that I had needs and offered up that. But, I was a shy kid and I was brought up, right, to just keep my problems to myself. Yeah. But, if nobody knows you have a problem, how can they offer up a solution, right? Um, but yeah, that was a very scary experience. Oh my goodness. So grateful. So grateful that he got through that. Cindy, I'm sure your sister knows that you love and care for her and that you have been there for her. You played an important role in her life for being a great support to her. We were great support to each other, but again, in that codependency sometimes, right? I became so codependent that I wasn't able to do much for myself, right? I wasn't very independent. In my mind, I was independent, but not in the physicality of my life. And it made me, right, not be able to properly make good decisions. And that's a truth, and I take responsibility. I'm making up for it now. I'm peddling water now, and I am owning my own decisions, right? My life is not perfect, but I think it is really pretty good in comparison to my past life, right? In the past decades, how far I've come. And I don't rely on others. Now, if people offer, right? If people recognize that there's a need, I'm not one to say no. If there's a need, if you're at, your lifeline is hanging there, you're not just going to walk right by it. You're going to grab it for support, right? Because that's why they call it a lifeline. But there are people out there that do say, I could do it all by myself. I don't need help. And then they miss that gift, right? And we got to think that sometimes that gift is not coming from that person, but that gift is from whoever, whatever, and that person is being inspired and directed in their kindnesses to you. And so, in not accepting and not grabbing that lifeline, right, we can be doing a disservice, not just to ourselves, but we're doing a disservice to the person who wants to give you that gift, and a disservice to whoever or whatever who recognizes you need this and you refuse to take it. But again, it's in our choices, right? And each one of us, we can only control our choices, our emotions, and our actions, right? Another lesson I learned from, I remember Evan Carmichael, right? Yeah, I just had a brain fart there. Okay. Uh, I had fluid drain from my knee early on, then surgery that got a lot of dark stuff out of my leg. Then I had a PICC line for massive antibiotics. I don't know what that is, but I'm assuming it's some kind of tube system. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's not a situation I ever want to see you in again. But having the cortisone, is that relatable to that, Andrew, or is that relatable from the, I know it's probably relatable to that because of the pain, right? But you won't get that, find yourself back in that situation if you don't resolve with the cortisone or that other procedure, right? I'd be interested to know in that. Yeah, well, I am optimistic and adamant that it is one and done, right? 100%. And I want to know if you're getting ever close to a situation where you find yourself in a vulnerable state like that ever again. Great. I want to be your support system, Andrew, right? You have been my support system for over a decade, right? You gotta let me do something, right? But let's hope that never comes to fruition, right? That never happens, because that would be a good thing, right? If whatever procedure that you do decide to have, that right, that it'll be the right thing for you. Oh my goodness, Cindy's all caught up in the conversation. There's a first. Usually I am so far behind when it comes to these guys. Like I said, these guys chat more than I do. And, everybody is just welcome to hang out in the background. Some people come in after work, or, right, when they put the kids to bed, right, after the dishes are done. But when you guys come in here and hang out with me, we always have a topic of discussion. And Andrew too, being that example, right? Being that example that, when you find yourself in a situation where you actually do need help, that, right, you follow through, right? Just don't become a paycheck for somebody. If it's not needed, if you can do those homeopathic, right, treatments. And I'm sure, Andrew, you've been doing a lot of Googling on the topic. So you're probably just as much an expert in that as your doctors. Let me have a sip of my coffee. I don't know if you guys have ever eaten naan bread. Naan bread is an Indian bread, and I've come to really enjoy naan. But what I do is I put teriyaki sauce on it, and I put cheese and onions and a big handful of banana peppers. I have become a big fan of banana peppers. Oh my goodness. I think I've been eating banana peppers for about a year now. Never had banana peppers before. I was never a spicy food person. And I like the hot peppers and jalapenos and stuff. I was never a big fan of that. But now I find I'm eating banana peppers. I have eaten the stuffed jalapenos too, which I really do enjoy. And I'm experimenting a little bit in the foods that I have been eating eating a lot more eggs only because they're a good protein for me. They're very easily digestible. Um, and because my meats are usually processed meats, right? Hamburger and sausages, right? Chicken burgers. That and I eat stew beef, but I don't eat red meat at all. Like I have not had a steak probably since I was between 10 and 12 years old, right? It just not my thing. My dad would eat the medium rare. He was actually the steak expert. He would cook the steaks, and he always thought they were perfect. But you stick a knife in it, they would just bleed all over the plate. And I was just like, I can't eat this, right? And it's not I think it probably was because of animals, right? That I probably would have made a good vegetarian, but meat was in the household, and because I was put on the Atkins diet most of the time when my mother and dad put me on a diet, it was always the Atkins diet, and you have to eat lots of protein in that. Grateful, right, that my dad would take me out for dinner. And when we go out for dinner, I would always have the veal cutlets because I really enjoyed veal cutlets. I didn't know what veal cutlets are. I haven't had a veal cutlet since I was an adult, only because I do know now that veal means baby cow, and so I've kind of pulled away from any red meat except for a really well done, like it well done. We're talking burnt and brown inside and falling and totally falling apart. So you know it's been in the oven for a very long time. So I'll have a roast beef dinner if it's like that. And I do stewing beef. I do like stew, and I haven't. I've got stew beef in the freezer right now. I have stew maybe 4 or 5 times a year, but for the most part, when it comes to my proteins, it's basically eggs. And like I said, I eat lots of sausages, right? I like sausages. I gave up wieners because I got food poisoning last year on was it last year? Yeah, about a year ago. I got really bad for 3 days. I was so sick. And it could have only been the wieners because that was all that I ate. But I got really bad food poisoning. And I've only had wieners once since then, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. I just and wieners were my favorite. Oh my good, because I don't eat a lot of meat. But hot dogs, right? I loved hot dogs. And now I just can't eat them anymore because of that experience. I had, I think specifically. I had that experience because whoever or whatever didn't want me on the wieners, right? And I wouldn't even watch videos on how they were processed because you always hear people say, you know how wieners are made, and anybody would start talking about how wieners would made, I would just shut them down or shut the topic down or close the book or right. I didn't want to know because right, if I'd known what they were made of and how they were made, I wouldn't have eaten them, right? So I think probably hot dogs are off of the plate for me for the most part. You never know. I might go to an exhibition or go on a date or something and right, you do the hot dog thing. I don't know in the moment. It'll be a choice that I make in that moment. But I don't think I could ever enjoy hot dogs like I did prior to that experience. I was a big fan of hot dogs. But that's what change is, right? To make decisions for ourselves. And being adults, we should be making decisions. And those decisions should never be based on what so and so did, right? So even though I gave you that tip that my sister said about the Epsom salts, right? Maybe you don't like baths, right? Maybe you're a shower guy, Andrew. So it would be in your choice and you just don't try these things out because somebody said so, right? It's in your own decision and in your own perspectives and understandings and research whether or not to try new things out, even with the cortisone. But I know you, Andrew, right? Just like I'm happy, hyper vigilant about the murderers and rapers. Well, that comes from experiences in my childhood, right? And in your own experience in that hospital, in that experience, right? You get to make your own choices in that. And I'm sure you're a little bit hyper vigilant in when it comes to hospitals now and in the medical system. My sister is pretty disillusioned right now. I don't know how to pull it out, but I also understand it's not my responsibility to pull her out of that. And right, she doesn't really allow me to, right? She thinks I'm a little bit preachy in that way. And she doesn't think in the same mindset as I do, right? So she's very headstrong and I have to appreciate and honor that fact that she gets to make her own decisions too, right? But again, unless we're listening to other people's conversations or little tips and stuff, right? How would you know what was a good resource, a good product, a good doctor, a, a good hot dog, right? Or, like I said, you guys hear me all the time. I talk about the Keen brand, right? Because I think it's just the most amazing shoe brand out there, especially when it comes to seniors and in taking care of your feet. I think it's an amazing brand. And if I didn't rave about that, how is it even the possibility that that information might come to somebody, right? That it would benefit by, right? And, for an extra $50 in a pair of shoes to have something that would make it so that you could be flexible and be out and about for another 10 or 20 years. I mean, right? I I learned that Keen was a good brand not because somebody suggested it to me, only because I happened on to a new pair of gum boots that I thought that they were at a thrift store and they were brand new. I bought them. They were my size and I fell in love with them, right? And now I'm hooked and now I've tried other shoes, right? They're walking shoes, they're water sandals, they're hiking sandals, and I've got a new pair and I think they're actually like for waitresses and people who work in retail and stuff. I think they're actually work shoes. And I think they would have been absolutely amazing work shoes for me when I worked in the bars, or maybe not in the bars, because when I worked in the bars and the nightclubs, I had to wear the high heels, right? I can't wear a high heel for a half an hour. I can't wear a high heel for 5 minutes, let alone a half an hour anymore. And it wasn't the fact that, I'm heavier, right? There was lots of hospitality and bar jobs that I had at the weight that I'm at right now, right? My weight really hasn't changed, right? Between 10 and 20 pounds in the past 30 years at the very least, right? But the idea that I was in those shoes, but I was in those shoes every night. So I became used to it. And then when I quit working in bars and nightclubs, I came out of the spike shoes, and my feet just went flat. Just totally. I can't even ice skate anymore. All my shoes have to have arches on them, right? Otherwise, my feet ache. Even in my runners and in my, not so much my sandals, but my runners, not my boots either, my key boots. That's why I love them so much. They're so good for me. They keep, because they're rubber soled too, like solely rubber, that it takes your weight off your feet, right? And another reason why I love that brand. But then again, without having these conversations with each other, without being social, which is a big thing about Alfred Adler's ideas, is in the social aspects of our life, how important it is to be social, because how do we learn? We learn off of each other, right? Not just our very tight community of 3 or 4 people, or our small family unit, or being an introvert and just hanging out with ourselves. We learn from each other, right? And that's a big part of why I love hanging out here on my live shows too, because especially on Sunday nights when you guys are in the comments, and I get to learn about you. It's just not about all about me, right? I come in, right? I'm here and I'm the one yapping, but I'm also trying to keep up in the comments. And over the years, I have gotten to know some of you very, very well. And you've become a big part of my life. And how would that have happened without this digital age, without me making the decision, right? That choice to be here on Sunday nights and take that time to get to know the people who, right? I'm so grateful that you guys spend that time with me. That because I could be doing this, what I'm doing, working in emotions and hanging out in the outdoors, but I could easily be doing that myself, because as much as I'm an extrovert, I am an introvert. I think I'm naturally an extrovert, but because of the way I was brought up, I learned to appreciate being an introvert, right? Right? Learn not to be seen, learn not to be heard. But where does that get us? Right? When we have a voice, when we have a message, when we have a little bit of information or referral or a lifeline, right? It doesn't serve anybody. It's important for us to be social, and I'm so grateful for my Sunday nights where I can actually connect with other people from all over the world, right? From Andrew from Bloomington, Indiana, right? Owen from the Bronx. Oh, wait. Is it the Bronx? Brooklyn. Brooklyn. And then William is from the Bronx. But I know these things and I appreciate these things, right? And it makes for interesting, wonderful world, doesn't it? Brooklyn. See, I got it in the end. I got you because you're both in New York, right? Because Owen and William are both from New York. Yeah, and I got the two mixed. And I remembered in the end only because in my mind, I had to go back to the Christmas card address when I sent you your Christmas card. And then I remembered, oh, Brooklyn. That's funny. Oh my goodness. Okay, hold on a second. I'm just going to come back in here. Uh, my cardio. Oh, here we go. Tammy says, how do I drink my coffee? I do 2 cream and 2 sweetener. At home, I do milk. Up until recently, I was doing what do you call artificial creamer, like Coffee Mate. But I'm trying not to have unnecessary chemicals into my system. And I know the sweeteners are chemicals, but at the same time, I'm trying to control my weight. For as much coffee as I drink, I don't want to be putting 2 tablespoons of sugar in my coffee. And then, even though I can't get diabetes runs very high in my family, and that blood sugar is still in my system, right? It's just not being digested, but it still has to come out one of the other ends, doesn't it? And so that sugar is not good for me, and it's not good for my weight too. And it's how I was able to maintain my weight, right? And I have to have fluids all the time, right? Because of the gastric bypass that I have. I have to have fluids all the time. And I'm not a big fan of water unless you got fruit crystals in it. Juice crystals, is that what you call them? Kool-Aid. And you can't get Kool-Aid anymore. I'm so bummed out that you can't get packages of Kool-Aid anymore. You can only buy them in those little squirt containers, but you can still buy them in Amazon. So I'm not sure, maybe the state still sells Kool-Aid crystals, but I sure miss the Kool-Aid crystals. And when I went into Amazon and saw that I could get for $35, I could get a whole case of Kool-Aid. I asked my sister, you want to go halfers with me on a case of Kool-Aid? They got flavors they never had when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was all about the or the lime Kool-Aid and the grape Kool-Aid. And now they have like mango and pineapple and all kinds of tropical fruits, and it's really passion fruit Kool-Aid. Like, it's so amazing, right? But I would like to be sampling those myself, and I'm really disappointed. I don't know what the reasoning is. There must have been a reason, because it was fairly inexpensive for that company to make Kool-Aid, right? And in the squirty bottles, I'm not sure in competition to the other squirty bottles, because there's a lot of the squirty bottles that are like sugar free and stuff out there. But the sugar crystals, they never put the sugar in it anyway, just enough to mix the flavor in there, which was not even a tablespoon of sugar, right? I always use sweetener in when I made a big jug of Kool-Aid or something. And I liked Kool-Aid. It was a good way for me to get the water into my system, right? Like I said, I'm not a big water fan. I'm from British Columbia, right? The water doesn't have a flavor. Here in Manitoba, we have very hard mineralized water, and it does have a lot of chlorine in it, and it's got flavor, and it just says, Cindy, this is not drinkable, right? And lots of people drink it. And bottled water, I do drink it on occasion, but the idea that the plastics seep out of the plastic bottles and into the water, that kind of puts me off a little bit too, right? So yeah, I stick to the coffee. I do the apple juices, and I do drink crystals, and I just water it down, right? But it's not the same. It's not my Kool-Aid, right? I will buy a big case of Kool-Aid at some point. I will. I did manage to pick up a couple of packages of Kool-Aid. They were promotional Kool-Aids in Ontario. I got them a few years ago. I'm not sure if they're still selling them, but I do like my Kool-Aid. I was brought up on Kool-Aid as a kid, right? Okay. Tammy says, I love banana peppers too, Cindy. I love hot things, salsas, and other things. I'm not a big fan of salsa. I will eat it on nachos and stuff if it comes with the nachos, but for the most part, no, salsa is not something that I keep in my grocery cupboards, and I don't really go to restaurants. They're just too expensive. They're just not in my budget. And again, for the lifestyle that I want to live in this moment and what it provides to me, you do make sacrifices in that. And one of those sacrifices is, Cindy, you don't get restaurants. And I don't miss them. I'm a good cook. I'm not going hungry. I make myself nice meals during the course of the day. And every once in a while, I don't know if you guys have Mother Marys. Is that what they call Mother Marys in the States? Or Big Mary? Big Mary? It's a restaurant and they specialize in chicken and they make a really nice chicken sandwich, the Big Mary, right? Chicken sandwich on and it goes on sale on Monday. So once in a while I'll go there and just grab a chicken burger, which is absolutely delicious. If you ever get a chance to come to Canada, they don't have them in the States. Yeah, they make amazing chicken burgers. Yeah. So I can't remember what they're called. Something Mary. Yeah, I can't remember. Okay, Tammy says, my cardiologist told me that eggs was good for the heart, which surprised me. I heard throughout the years eggs being bad. Some say good. Who knows? Yeah, you know what? I remember that, the cholesterol is very high in eggs. And because my dad had congenital heart disease, he didn't eat a lot of eggs. He liked his red meat, but he didn't eat a lot of eggs. But again, my dad didn't give up butter. My dad never ate margarine. That was poor people food. And now margarine is more expensive than a pound of butter. If you go to the grocery store and you buy a container of margarine, it's just as expensive as buying a pound of butter. I would much rather buy a pound of butter. I love the flavor of real butter, especially when you go to the movie theater and have it on popcorn. That's a treat, but I don't usually pay for the movies. I maybe go to one movie a year, and usually it's a outing that my sister takes care of. And I told her I would take care of the next one, but we haven't gone out to a movie. We were supposed to go see Anaconda, but she has been sick and taking care of her well-being. I hope she gets her driver's license back soon, right? She feels really trapped in her house. But it's winter. We're supposed to feel a little bit trapped by winter, aren't we? You stay indoors and you get the house projects done and the redecorating done, and then in the summertime you go out and you do your adventuring and then the outdoor chores when it comes to the house. But yeah, I do wish that she does get her vehicle back soon. She said possibly in another month or so they might give her driver's license back. She's got to get needles in the eye to drain fluid from behind her eyes. Ugh, ugh. I had a hard time putting my contacts. For me, it's nothing now, but when I first got my contacts, oh my goodness, it freaked me out putting my contact lenses in. So I understand that, but I couldn't even imagine having a needle put in your eye. That'd just be, ugh. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I understand that eggs aren't always the best. It's to each person, right? Tammy says, when my husband was alive, he loved chili dogs. I like them too once in a while. Oh my goodness, I haven't had a chili dog in years. 7-Eleven sells chili dogs, but I haven't had a chili dog. I don't think I've ever had a chili dog from 7-Eleven. Yeah, but I think they have pretty good deals when it comes to hot dogs. Andrew says, one thing I would suggest to anyone is to avoid pain medicines that are opioid based. These are addictive and have destroyed people's lives. I'm with you 100%, Andrew. I took my first aspirin this week. I got out of bed and I was sleeping on my arm. And I got a little bit nervous. Am I having a stroke? Am I having a heart attack? So my aspirin were on the side of my bed. I said, it's not going to hurt you, Cindy, to have an aspirin. And I took an aspirin. But that was the first bit of medication I have taken in years. I know a few years ago I did take some medication for um for my for my bronchitis. Sometimes when I get a cold, I get bronchitis and it's really hard to get rid of the cough. For me, sometimes it will last for a couple months sometimes. So I will take those tablets, those 24-hour tablets, and just to help me get over that cough, but I haven't done that even in years. I do take my vaccinations. I get my flu shot every year, and I do get my COVID updates on that. But again, that's to each one of our choices whether or not to do that. And because we don't pay for those here in Canada, so they just doctors they're at Shoppers Drug Mart. They have a room, and you just go in and you get your vaccinations, and off you go. And I just trust that those shots will last me through the winter. I'm very grateful. I haven't had COVID, and right, I've been in those jobs where I right and working in with the public that I should have gotten it numerous times. Yeah. Okay. Oh my goodness, we're coming to an end here, you guys. I'm sorry, I didn't even look at the clock tonight. Um, but yeah, you're 100% right, Andrew. Avoid the medication if you have to. I don't take any medication, but if I had to, I would. If my doctor said I had to take blood pressure pills, I would get a second opinion. And then if that doctor said blood pressure pills, then I would get blood pressure pills. I'm not just getting blood pressure pills because my doctor is friends with the pharmacist, right? That's just not proper in the way that they should work. Okay. Tammy says, my parents raised us kids like that. Kids should be seen and not heard. We got lots of similarities in that. Tammy, I was brought up the same way. Uh yeah, and I never got to talk either, but it's important to be social and right. And if you are an interviewer, just coming in the way you do, the way you've been communicating with me since you've been hanging out with us, Tammy, it's been absolutely amazing. And it's socializing, isn't it? And you get to learn about other people's lives, and you never know when you find yourself in the same situation, right? Tammy says, I can send you Kool-Aid packets here in the state of Michigan. We still have a couple of stores that sell them. What kinds do you like? Oh my goodness. I want the pineapple mango if you have the pineapple mango, but I love lime. I love grape. I love them all. I love them. I love them absolutely all. But don't worry yourself, Tammy, because I think they're like $40 and I can get a case of like 60 of them off of Amazon. And me and my sister can go halfers in that. She can have half the Kool-Aid packs, or I could take them all, right? And they would last me a long time, right? 65 packs would last me probably a couple of years for sure. But that's so kind of you, Tammy. I so appreciate that. I can send you Kool-Aid packets here in the state of Michigan. Oh my goodness. What a nice offer that is. Okay, you guys, let's say our goodbyes. I've held you up long enough, right? I hope there's a little bit of time left in the Super Bowl. And right, if you missed it, I apologize. And I hope there's a rerun that you can make yourself some popcorn and grab yourself a Kool-Aid or a bottle of beer and enjoy yourself. Oh my goodness. I hardly ever eat restaurant foods. Once in a blue moon, I will get something from a restaurant for a treat. I get coffees from the coffee shop, Tim Hortons. I'm a Tim Hortons fan, and I will get coffee. It's my special treat. I'll get that from Tim Hortons. Or I like the McDonald's coffee too. They have good cups, like the actual cups that I like. They keep the coffee hot for a long time. But if I'm going to go for a walk, I usually take my coffee mug with me. And if I have my coffee mug, then usually my coffee will stay hot until I get home. Okay, you guys. Andrew, thank you so much for coming in. Owen, right? Thank you so much. Always in here taking care of everybody and joining in on the conversations. And Tammy, oh my goodness, you're getting close. You got that little crown beside your name there. You just might have to get your moderator key, right? It'll have to be well, we'll see when we do that. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you next Sunday. If you want to pop in during the week, if you want to email me and you have my email, give me a little hello, right? Let me know what's going on, and especially if there's something important going on in your life, right? I'll be happy to keep you company in it because you guys are always happy to keep me company in mine. Okay, you guys, have a great night, and we'll see you next week.